Hello everyone, hold on, you don't see me if I stay here. In the meantime, while I'll park, I will tell you that my name is Clara and I'm the owner of the Ink Path, this place where I talk about books and about other stuff in English and in Spanish. Normally in Spanish because I'm Spanish, but this channel has the peculiarity of being a bilingual channel where I talk about books. So if you're new here, I will leave all the social media down below. You can subscribe and like the video if you enjoy it, so you don't miss anything that I post. Oh, and for not missing any of the videos, you should click the notification button, the bell button down below, just in case. Another thing, right now my throat is a little bit weird, it's a little bit rusty today. In my normal job, I have to do a lot of talking, and that's the result of me like having some kind of throat treatment at the moment. So that's why you will probably see me like chewing and doing something in my mouth, but it's basically because I'm afraid of losing my voice while I'm doing this video. Other than that, today we are going to talk about audiobooks and why I love them so much. The funny thing about audiobooks is that I am very new to them, but I'm really enjoying them. So let's start. Let's going to do a review about 2 audiobooks that I really enjoy. We are start in 3, 2, 1, go. The first book I'm going to do an audio review of, it's The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. For those who don't know, it's one of my favorite books of all time. I actually met the author once here in Madrid, and I really enjoyed chatting with him a little bit. And it was very crowded, the place where I actually went to the signing. And as I said, it's one of my favorite books. And the reason why I decided to do a reread in audiobook form, it was because of my work. My work at the moment as a PhD student asked me to do a really big amount of reading, and I found really hard to concentrate on reading for pleasure after I have done several reading articles and other kind of non-fictional books. Therefore, when I have free time, I actually don't want to read that much. You will probably see that. You would probably notice that already on my reading challenge. I'm taking it very slowly this time. However, I found that rereading the one of my favorite books in audiobook form, knowing that it's a very chunky book, it was very interesting because it was as if I didn't have to do the effort of reading the said book. In this case, I read the book The Name of the Wind in Spanish, so I had the pleasure of listening to the voice actor who actually voices Steve Rogers, Captain America, when they translate the movie for our cinema. And I love that voice actor. I feel that he, apart from having a really incredible voice that I'm very aware of, I actually identify him very well. I love listening to him, like giving his voice to be Quoth and the other characters in the series, in this book. I consider it very intimate because although I already knew the story, in my case, I had the feeling that I was closer to Quoth than I've been like reading the proper physical form. Why I said this? I said this because in The Name of the Wind, if you don't know it, we follow a person who actually records or transcribes stories, and then he gives this knowledge to a lord in this fantasy land, who is the one that actually pays for him or to do this job. In this case, this person, this chronist, if I am not mistaken, he actually has this quest of finding a man that is more of a myth than a real person, and he knows about him that this mythological actor, this mythological character, was very good with music. He was very talented, also very cunning and quite dangerous. So when he arrives at a kind of tavern in a very, very far away kind of little town, he actually recognizes the owner of this tavern as this person, as this kind of mythological character that is actually a real man. And he convinced him to tell his story. Like, I'm not going to write anything you don't want me to write. Just tell me your story. I will be as free as and honest as I can, and you're going to be the one telling me the story. I'm not going to dulcify, or I'm not going to invent anything at all. This owner of the tavern decides that yes, he's going to accept the deal, but you only have 3 days to actually do so, to transcribe his whole story, and he will be the one telling it. He will be very careful on the words, and he will be very sure about what the chronist actually writes down. So at the beginning of the story, we have this lost tavern in the middle of nowhere, and this man who has a secret, and we travel to far away in time when this man was young, to go with him some kind of the story of his life. So to me, this story, even if it's a trilogy, and even if it's a high fantasy trilogy, I found that it was very human when I first read it. I found that I was very, very connected to the main character, who is not a trustworthy narrator. Now, that's important because it's one of the most incredible and perfectly knitted details of the story. Quoth, this man is telling his own story. He's going to try and tell you what is the legend, what other people said about him, that became later on the legend that we know. But he's going to try to explain his own story in his own words. Therefore, he's not going to admit when he was kind of mistaken. And it's normal that when you tell your own story, you're going to try and put yourself like first. You're going to put yourself as the valiant hero in this case. Having said that, and noticing in my second read that maybe a few aspects were quite solved to be convenient to the plot, I still enjoy it. However, during my audio enjoyment of the proper story, I found myself more, as I said before, more drawn to the story because of the fact that in the story, the tale that Quoth is telling, when he is telling his own life story, that tale is being told. So instead of reading it, which implies that someone else has, in my case, translated the words into another language, I was listening to what I considered Quoth voice. So having that kind of sensorial element added to the proper plot that I already knew and loved, that element specifically in a story that's been orally told in a kind of talking conversation, added more authenticity. I was laughing at the jokes more than I was laughing when I read them in the first place. I was enjoying the kind of ambiguity of Wolf's character, in the sense that I could actually tell when he wasn't being completely honest, because I could sense that kind of lie in his own voice, and I love that. Again, I wasn't very sure about this kind of audiobook form, but I wasn't very sure initially, because I know that in this story we have a main character that we already spoke of, but we have a huge amount of secondary characters. Therefore, I wasn't very sure if this author was going to be able to voice them all, or if we are going to have several other actors joining in, or if, in case that we only have one actor or actress, was he going to be, or she going to be, able to create different voices? So I didn't mistake, I didn't mistake, I don't know, quote for his father, his mother, or one of his lovers. And I was highly pleased with how the voice actor managed to do all the voices, because he was quite, apart from being professional, he was quite specific with the regions of this fantastic realm where the story is set. Therefore, in the second read, I discovered that even though I knew several characters were not from the same region as Quoth is, they sound very different. Like, I wasn't expecting someone from the south to sound almost as Arabic, or as, I don't know, for example, so melodic than he actually sounded. This experience gave me more depth in the case of added more background and more intensity on the secondary characters, because I wasn't very sure about the differences between them, other than, for example, when a character had trouble pronouncing certain vowels or certain vocals. I wasn't that connected to the variety and diversity that this book apparently has. Now I would be able to tell you, fingers crossed and eyes closed, that by hearing them I knew who they were, and that's very intriguing in the sense of I already knew the characters for how I read them. I had several voices very clear in my head, and then it was very interesting to see, for example, that Dina, the character of Dina, that I'm not going to talk a lot of because spoilers, she is in her voice, in the voice that this author actually gave her, as Swifty and as intriguing as I thought she would be, but I never gave her a voice when, for example, Quoth had a very, very distinctive voice in my head. I enjoyed like trying to guess the ages of the characters and how every character voices, if we met them at the beginning of the story, how they change throughout the story, if they follow us in the journey. I don't know, I found it more complex than the proper written form. And I'm not sure about the English version, but if you want to give it a try, the Spanish version is spectacular. I love it. The next book we are going to talk is actually a new book for me, but it's not new. We are going to talk about 13 Reasons Why by J. Asher. Now, I know that this book is quite canon inside the YA genre that you know that I love. It's basically what I would normally read. And I know that now with Netflix doing the TV show, this is not a sponsor or paid by either the publisher company of responsible of the book or the producer, the Netflix channel or network. This is not a sponsor by any means. With the show, the book has regained popularity and controversy at some point, but I'm not going to enter into controversy. I'm going to give you my opinion on the book. Now, to be able to understand from where I'm coming, I will say that I started watching the show, that I watched like 4 episodes, I think, and when things got a little bit complicated and hurtful, I decided to stop and I decided to read the whole book. Now, you have to know that I love watching TV shows and movies in English if I can, and if they are done in English originally, because that's how I learn and how I recycle myself when I feel like I need to reset my brain into English again. Also because it's weird, but my brain works better when I'm speaking in English. I'm quite quirky, as you may already know. So I started watching the show in English because I was watching it on my own, and when I stopped and I decided to read the book first because I want to be ready for what I was going to come, I discovered that when I needed to pick it up from the library, I only have Spanish versions of the book. But because I started watching the show in English, for me they already have entity as English speakers, so reading them in Spanish, it was quite weird. So I decided to go with an audiobook in English for this one, and I found myself trapped inside the tapes. Now, for those who don't know what is the 13 Reasons Why, just in case, it tells the story of Clay, a normal, ordinary kind of young boy, a teenager, who one day received a really mysterious package full of cassette tapes. And along with the cassette tapes, he has a map and a set of instructions very clear. Listen to all the tapes. Go to the places, mark on the map if you want, and then pass it on to the next person on the list. In the box is also a list. When he decided to use a very old music electronic device that allows you to listen to cassettes, he discovered that in the tapes he hears Hannah Baker. Hannah Baker is one of his classmates who, at the beginning of the story, before the story began, she decided to commit suicide and succeeded in that. Now, he's not very sure about why he has received those tapes, because Clay doesn't remember being bad or being mean to Hannah. According to him, he was quite indifferent. He was just a classmate. So receiving the tapes that explain why Hannah did what he did in the end, and why or who is the responsible for each of the decisions that ended up in that final moment. Clay is just very confused, so even he is not very sure about why he has received those tapes. He decided to start listening to her. However, as the story unfolds, the truths revealing in the tapes are some kind of very hard to bear. And I'm saying that because I find them very hard at very several points in my reading experience, in my listening experience. One, because this version of audiobook that I selected had two narrators. You had Clay's voice and you had Hannah's voice. Therefore, you were listening with Clay. At the same time, Clay did, listening to someone pretending to be Hannah, actually acting very well as Hannah, which ended up with me crying several times, wanted to stop Hannah from what I knew was going to be the end, wanting to stop the tapes and throwing them through the window. Now, I am not an expert, I am not a teacher, I am not a psychologist, I am only saying this from my experience, that sometimes it's very confusing, but it's what I need to say. In terms of way of writing the story, in terms of technique and writing skills, I found that the use of the first person sentence allows you to empathize both sides with Clay and with Hannah, because you're inside Clay's confused mind and with the sorrow of Hannah, knowing that she has made a decision very clear and that she needs to explain everything before making the final act. That was very well done, that was very well acted, and I found myself crying very hard over this book, because it not only tackles bullying or suicide, it tackles alcohol or drug abuse of any substance. Also, it tackles sexual assault and abuse of that sort. It tackles school issues and how teachers deal with such issues, self-esteem issues, a lot of topics that actually were very close to my heart. I don't normally share private information in these videos because I find that there are several elements of me that you don't need to know. However, I was very confused when I read this story because I knew that I wanted to do a review because it felt really hard. It felt really real. And as I said, if I cried a lot, if the book moved me in a certain way, if it has important messages, as it has, in my point of view, I had to review it as I'm doing now. And admitting that I had to review it, it was also admitting that at some point I was going to have to deal with several issues that this story deals with, that I also dealt with them in the past. That wasn't easy because it meant that I had to go back to a younger version of myself that experienced several things that she shouldn't experience, that anyone should experience, I hope. And it was quite revealing to notice that I actually would have loved to read this story 10 years ago. 10 years ago. When it was first published in Spanish, I don't remember. But looking back now, my younger version would have been very grateful for the story. Not because I share the opinion on the ending of Hannah's story, but because this book, to me, points out several topics, but points out the fact that you are not alone. So, yeah, it was quite of a read for me. Both of them were, but certain reasons why was quite special. Yeah. So this is it. This is my long review. I'm sorry for taking so long, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you have read the books, I hope you tell me your opinion on them, or if you want to chat about any of the topics that you may find important. See you next week. Bye.